The Natchez Tornado of 1840 was one of the most devastating natural disasters in American history. It struck with little warning, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. Imagine living in the Antebellum South before the Civil War. The Mississippi River was the main artery connecting the Gulf of Mexico with the northern states. Cities like Natchez grew along the riverbanks, offering a haven for weary riverboat travelers and barges. On Thursday, May 7, 1840, the people of Natchez were preparing for lunch. They saw a strong thunderstorm heading their way, so many retreated to their homes and sat on their front porches to eat lunch. The night before, a round of thunderstorms blew through. They assumed this was round 2, so they thought little about the danger headed their way. There were no weather radars or warnings. The people of Natchez assumed the rain would come and they could return to their routines once the rain stopped. A few moments later, 20 miles southwest over the fields and forests of Concordia, Louisiana, and the Deer Park and Slocum area, a killer tornado was born. Only seconds were required for a minimal twister to grow into a massive tornado. The tornado was so powerful that the sound of its devastation could be heard for miles. Trees were uprooted and stripped of their bark. Massive timbers cracked and split. Many became missiles hitting both people and animals. This debris became like missiles hitting structures, animals, and people. Debris filled the atmosphere, and anyone in the monster's path, even animals, did everything possible to get out of the way. The storm's fury was relentless as it tore through the riverbanks. Homes, businesses, and lives were swept away in an instant, leaving a trail of unimaginable destruction in its wake. The sheer power of the tornado was evident in the shattered remnants it left behind, a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving force. The storm moved on from Concordia up the Mississippi River. It centered the river about 7 miles south of Natchez and was on track for Natchez and the small community of Vidalia. As it passed, it destroyed everything on the river's banks. The people had no phones or radios, and there was no national weather service, so that no one could warn them about the pending doom. The storm came full speed to the unsuspecting people of Natchez. Many in Natchez decided to take advantage of the cooling rain and winds, given that they had no air conditioning. The cool rain and breeze were welcomed relief from the midday heat. Most were sitting on their front porches eating lunch when the storm hit. Those on the river were the first to hear what must have been a thunderous roar. Still, most did nothing to prepare for the monster that would arrive shortly before 1 p.m. The storm slammed into Natchez shortly before 1 p.m. By then, the twister was a mile wide and debris filled the air. Flatboats and men were tossed into the air like sardines as the river churned with massive waves and whitecaps. Crews on boats and passengers were blown into the river while others were picked up and dropped on land. The funnel slammed the central and northern portions of Natchez. One witness reported, "The air was black with whirling eddies of walls, roofs, chimneys, and huge timbers from distant ruins, all shot through the air as if thrown from a mighty catapult." The aftermath of the tornado was nothing short of devastating. Buildings were reduced to rubble and the landscape was unrecognizable. The people of Natchez faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives amidst the wreckage. The community, though battered and bruised, showed remarkable resilience in the face of such overwhelming tragedy. Along the Natchez and Vidalia banks, homes, stores, steamboats and other vessels were destroyed. Houses in the towns burst open. "Our devoted city is in ruins," one local reporter wrote, "while the dead remain unburied and the wounded groan for help." After the storm passed, destruction was everywhere. In 1840, there was no Red Cross, no National Guard, no presidential disaster decree, and no mobilization of medical personnel from other cities or states. Neighbor helped neighbor. Churches were the only charities available. Observers struggled to describe the destruction. One newspaper reported, "The scene sickens the heart. All is swept away. and beneath the ruins still lay crushed the bodies of many strangers. The local paper recorded several stories of the survivors, such as Mrs. Alexander's. She was rescued from the ruins of the Steamboat Hotel. She was severely injured, and her 2 children were found in her arms, and both were dead. The loss of life and damage were extensive near the river. The local newspaper reported that the destruction of the flatboats is devastating. At least 60 crew members were tossed into the raging river, where most drowned. The death toll from the Natchez Tornado of 1840 was staggering. Lives were lost in an instant, and the community was left in shock and mourning. Those on the docks estimated that some 200 likely perished who were thrown from flatboats. The amount of money lost is unknown. The steamboat Hines, with most of her crew, sank in the storm. The Prairie from St. Louis was damaged to the point it could not be used. The steamer St. Lawrence was destroyed. Reports from Concordia Parish were just as bleak. The area was sparsely populated and was mostly farmland. However, the plantations up to 20 miles away reported extensive damage to structures and crops, as well as the loss of life, mainly among the enslaved population, as their houses were carried away and destroyed. The best estimates are approximately 317 died, and the storm injured 109. This is the only storm recorded where more died than were injured. Most of the fatalities occurred on the river, and some 269 of those who lost their lives were at the river that day. Some 47 deaths occurred on the river in Natchez. However, the death toll was likely much higher. The numbers do not consider the likely deaths along the Concordia plantations bordering the Mississippi. Enslaved people were often not counted among the deceased because their numbers were not reported by the planters who owned the plantations. The tornado's destruction on land and water was estimated at $1,269,000 in 1840 dollars. That would translate today into about $21 million. How strong was the tornado? The best guess is that the storm reached the top of the Fujita scale as an F5. The wind speed in an F5 tornado ranges from 207 to 260 miles per hour. The damage tends to support this conclusion. F5 tornadoes can lift a framed house from its foundations. Once lifted, the wind typically rips the house apart. This is when unsuspecting victims often perished. The story is a stark reminder that we should always be aware of our environment and exercise caution. Had these people known what was coming, perhaps many could have escaped. Instead, the Natchez Tornado of 1840 held the record for most killed by a tornado until 1925.